The Pyramids of Montauk, Chapter 13, the Morphogenetic Grid. That Turtle Cove is the legendary source of the universe, is very representative of the idea that Montauk is a conduit or gateway to the vortex of creation itself. I'd like to point out that within all three documents, the New Order of the Ages, the Voyagers, Voyagers 2, Amenti from Ashadayan, where I read about the Guardian Alliance, Pyramids of Montauk, obviously, but also one further, Decoding the Hive Mind. All of this information is flowing in synchronous fashion, as this is right at the point of each document. It's all centering upon the morphogenetic grid. So with that in mind, let's continue our investigation, shall we? The inherent symmetry of the Hebrew alphabet, those letters of fire, was brought to your attention not because I want to convert you to Judaism, but to demonstrate beyond a doubt that the process of creation was imprinted in the minds and souls of the ancients. The Sanskrit, Greek, and Arabic alphabets also possess such divine symmetry, and there are probably many other ancient languages that do the same. The only reason the Montauk Project has been successful as a book is because the events it attempts to describe are considered remarkable and excite interest. The entire thesis of the book is that mankind can generate consciousness in such a manner as to manipulate matter, energy, space, and time. At Montauk, the processes of creation were harnessed, at least for a short time. The only reason this is noteworthy or interesting is because the consciousness of society has divorced itself from the process of creation. If everyone could do it, no one would be interested. Of course, this implies that there is a secret power in the universe who can accomplish such miracles and act as a hidden influence. This brings us to the realm of what has been known in our society as God. Since the beginning of history, people have had disagreement concerning God, what he looks like, and whether or not he exists. Any logical and intelligent person can easily recognize that the common denominator for what is usually described as God could be more enthusiastically described as the creative principle of existence. No one has to believe in a bearded man with white robes in order to witness a flower blossom or the birth of a baby. These are creational processes and are viewed without denial. It is only when we associate these processes with divine beings of particular characteristics that we are likely to get social strife and religious wars. Disagreement concerning the nature of creation is the result of divisiveness and polarized schools of thought that has gone on for millennia. If you possess the secret to creation and didn't want anyone else to know it, you would do well to unfurl diverse schools of thought among the population and thereby incite debate and fighting. If you can keep the people distracted, they will never suspect there are even any worthwhile secrets to pursue. Of course, keeping the pot boiling soon becomes a full-time job, and the entire scenario becomes rather complex, not unlike our present circumstances on Earth today. In America, there has been much debate between creationists and evolutionists. At the risk of oversimplifying the matter, creationists believe that God created man from mud in a supernatural fashion, while evolutionists maintain that man evolved from the animal kingdom. Both of these theories have some truth in them, just enough to keep people interested and arguing. Neither embrace what could be termed the actual theory of creation and evolution. So, what is the story? In all matter and biological organisms, there are both seen and unseen processes. We can observe some of these unseen processes by dissection and microscopic inspection, but no matter how far we break it down, there will still be unseen processes at work. The microscope can only take us so far. If we rely on our extrasensory perception or alter our state of consciousness, We could dig deeper as we leave our microscope and would eventually come to an incredible world of geometrical patterns that are whirling, interacting, and doing all sorts of symmetrical wonders. All of these various patterns can be broken down into the 5 Platonic solids as were discussed previously. The evolution and interactions of these various shapes, the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the isosahedron, and the dodecahedron, is known as the science of sacred geometry, and all the laws of the physical sciences reflect and conform with it. Atoms, molecules, snowflakes, and flowers all evolve with respect to exact geometric interplays that result in varying degrees of harmony. Mathematical progression is easily viewable in the periodic table of chemistry. The science of biology is reduced to geometric shapes and swirls, helixes of the DNA strands that conform to or can be derived from the 5 Platonic solids. The entire mechanics of this are infinite and are not intended to be the subject of this book. What is important is to identify the functional process of evolution and the fact that it conforms to these various shapes. There is a branch of biology called morphology, which concerns itself with the form and structure of plants and animals. The man who coined the word morphology was J.W. von Goethe, a German occultist who taught Rudolf Steiner, a close friend of Aleister Crowley. When Goethe and Steiner used the term morphology, they were also referring to the study of the form and structure of the earth. This is also an approved dictionary definition as well. Thus, the word itself suggests a relationship between the biological and strictly physical aspects of existence. As life evolves, it moves in a myriad of ways through these geometric patterns. Before biological life evolved on this planet, the Earth itself had to evolve along these same lines. By the time the Earth found itself revolving around the sun, it had already taken its physical shape and characteristics based in part upon the various other bodies orbiting in the heavens, its own orbit and spin, plus whatever other cosmic variables might have been included in the equation. There are also other internal processes at work within the Earth's core structure, and much of this had to do with geometrical patterns interfacing with the wells of chaos. Any extraterrestrial beings involved would be supplementary to and complementary of the natural forces I am talking about here. It was in this context that biological life evolved. The word geometry itself means to measure the earth. As lichen and plankton began to evolve into higher forms of life, it utilized the 4 alchemical elements of fire, the sun, water, earth, and air. The consciousness of primitive life would have been in tune with the natural geometric or grid patterns on an instinctual basis. These grid lines serve as pathways to and from the creational process known as life. As stated earlier in this work, we call these pathways and its entire ecostructure the morphogenetic grid. Morph meaning change, and genetic referring to the genesis or beginning. The morphogenetic grid can be understood as the conduit through which changes and thus evolutionary programs are conducted. We routinely see reflections of this function in everyday life, even if it is in terms of mundane things like fashion and social attitudes. Many of the intangibles and sensitive feelings in life can be ascribed to the morphogenetic grid. Homing pigeons and migrating birds also use the grid to determine where they are going. Slang and the 100th monkey effect find their way to different geographical locations through the morphogenetic grid. The 100th monkey effect is based on the fact that if a certain percentage of the monkey population learns something, the function will automatically telepath to all similar monkeys on the planet, even those who are isolated on an island. The critical monkey who bridges the gap is referred to as the 100th monkey. Although anyone with the slightest sensitivity and intelligence can readily perceive or discover that such a grid exists, there is a much more sobering fact to consider once we accept that it exists. There is no one ostensibly in charge of it. In other words, there is apparently no one who is monitoring and programming evolution in a positive and business-like manner. At least if they are, they're not making themselves very well known. Most people, particularly your television commentators, are just muddling along in time and reporting their version of what happens. In recent years, there has been much panic pumped into the grid as people have focused on environmental crisis. Some want us to believe the Earth is in direct threat of extinction by reason of a greenhouse effect or other means. Others want us to think that environmentalists have their own corrupt and sinister agenda. All of us are a part of this group consciousness, and I have brought the environment issue to view as you probably have strong emotional feelings about it one way or another. You can feel the pulse of the grid in this manner. And the environmental issue, multiple sides have various agendas for wanting you to believe different things. The main threat to anyone's personal or larger environment is lack of accurate information. As primitive forms of life like lichen and algae evolved, they emitted different waves, frequencies, and electromagnetic phenomena in an attempt to survive and intermix with different elements and life forms. Eventually, different species evolved, each sharing the same electromagnetic codes with their brethren. But all the different life forms shared one thing in common: the basic electromagnetic codes which are recognized as life. The energy between the species and the grid is interchangeable, with the grid acting as a computer storehouse of information. Ordinary observation of life and evolution tells us that life evolves according to a program that has reference to every creature that has lived on the earth. For all practical purposes, the computer exists within the energy stream of the morphogenetic grid. An entire study could be done in terms of computer terminology and the grid, and perhaps we will see some new innovative software on this subject in the future. Anyone doing work in this direction should remember that it was John von Neumann who invented the modern computer. The highway of information along the grid was called the sleeping collective unconscious by Carl Jung and many others. Because we are all plugged into the grid, the highway allows for direct communication to occur between species, and it is in this respect that an awakened telepath can read your thoughts. It is in this manner that we may define the path of thought as being instantaneously received or transmitted. Thought is the amplified response or action of the various energy bodies that make up an individual. These energy bodies are termed the vital, physical, emotional, astral, mental, and the subtle energy light bodies. They encompass the entire vehicle of the physical body. When thought occurs, it is first processed as a disturbance in the subtle fields. Eventually, the emotional body imprints this as a visual image before it is brought to the gross level as language. This is why a telepath can read your thoughts even if the language is unknown. As a species, we create a matrix of energy known as the human wave form, and are fed as one body by the sleeping collective unconscious. This is why people in different locations can adopt the same habits, patterns, or speech, and on a deeper level, it is the morphogenetic grid which feeds the sleeping collective unconscious. All of this data brings us to a very interesting question: who programs the evolutionary computer, and who feeds the morphogenetic grid? Before we examine this, we will first take another look at one of the diskettes used to write the programs on, Duncan Cameron. Folks, thus concludes chapter 13. We will take a brief intermission and return when time allows in the morphogenetic grid infrastructure. Namaste, namaskaram.